Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flizanes, your empowerment strategist and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about stress reduction versus stress management. I am sharing an episode that I did on Dr. William Davis's podcast, Defiant Health. Before we get to that podcast, though, I do want to talk a little bit more specifically about this concept. And before we get into that concept, I do want to announce that it is February 2022, and I have opened the applications for the next Empowerment Strategist certification in 2022. There are 6 open available slots, and you can go to jdflizanes.com/cert, C-E-R-T, to apply. Applications and enrollment end April 1st when we start the next course of trainers. Also, in case you haven't heard, I'm doing a free workshop on February 23rd called The 3 Reasons Why Traditional Talk Therapy is Ineffective. And I'm sure after today's episode, you might be able to hear some of those. They're not all in here, and I'm going to flush them out pretty deeply, and I'm going to go over a lot more about what to do instead and some of the other things to consider. So that is happening on Wednesday, February 23rd, and you can sign up for that free workshop at jjflizanes.com/therapy. Okay, so today's show was originally called Identifying the Emotional Blocks That Prevent Us from Success. And that again went on Dr. William Davis's podcast. There is a video of this also. So you can go to jjflizanes.tv to see that video of Dr. Davis interviewing me. And I guess I'll do a little apology in the beginning here because he told me he gave me 30 minutes. All right. Now, if you've been listening to my show for any length of time, you know that if you tell JJ she has 30 minutes, what am I going to do? I'm going to cram as much as I possibly can into that 30 minutes, which means I'm going to talk maybe faster than normal. So apologies ahead of time. Slow down the podcast. Make it slower versus faster if you're the person who I talk too fast for, and or listen to it again, because I literally feel like I have this one shot, because I didn't know after this interview he actually invited me to speak to his membership. And he's got about 1,000 people in his membership, and every week they meet, and sometimes he brings in guest experts. So I actually did have another shot at continuing to talk and explain and teach and share, but it was only to a smaller group within Dr. Davis's organization. And he told me that sometimes they go real deep and they stay like up to 2 hours, but normally it was an hour and I could do whatever I was comfortable with. And I actually ended up staying over an hour and a half, and I think he had to kick me out because, as you will tell, even if you're new to me, the passion behind what I'm talking about is real, and I literally could talk about this for hours and hours and hours because I've been talking about it for years and years and years. So let's address stress management and stress reduction. So there's a lot of talk, and I've seen, there's movies and there's programs and therapies and about stress management. And just think about that word for a second. Management. Not reduction, stress management. Why would you want to manage stress when you could reduce it? But I think for most people, they consider stress something external. Well, I'm going to manage my stress because I can't control my stress because my stress is outside of me. And that would be one point of view, that I can't control the world. Therefore, when it affects me negatively, I have to find a way to manage that. That might be one approach, but it isn't going to get you anywhere because it takes the victim position that life is happening to you versus life is happening for you. It also takes the position that your circumstances dictate your response. So let's look at stress. Stress is our feelings, and they can be different feelings for all kinds of people. You can have stress that feels like anger. You can have stress that feels like frustration. You can have stress that feels like nervousness. So stress across the board is going to change person to person. Why? Because we're all living on our specific frequency, and we're all interpreting with our brains and we all have different ways of looking and viewing things. Something that stresses somebody out doesn't necessarily stress a different person out. Like the same situation isn't going to be looked at in the same way or responded to in the same way by two different people. So therefore, you can't blame the circumstance if two people react differently to it. It becomes an inside job. So we look at stress reduction. So I just in case you use this, and this is a concept probably more for those of you that are new to me, or those of you who are men, or those of you that are in corporate, or those of you in environments where stress management is like a hot buzzword. And I really don't like stress management because, as I say on this podcast interview, stress management is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The outcome stays the same, right? We just rearranged the chairs. So that would be managing something, but we haven't actually changed anything. So looking at stress reduction, first we have to identify a lot of layers to what that stress is. So what is it? Why are you stressed about it? What does it mean about you? What are your needs underneath this that aren't getting met, or that at least your perception is they're not getting met? And now we're going back to the feelings and the needs list and all the nonviolent communication and the 3 steps to effective communication. So if you've listened to any of those shows, or if you have the feelings and needs list, I would invite you to pull it out on a regular basis to start to look at how you interpret situations, what your story about them is, and then how to get your needs met. Because I'll tell you that you don't have stress unless there's a need not being met. All negative emotion indicates that there's either a need not being met or a perception of a need not being met. So in order for us to reduce stress, we have to situationally start looking at what's beneath the conversation you're telling yourself, what's beneath the perspective that you have that's causing you to feel or react in the way that you do. My goal for everybody always is to look at healing. And to me, healing means you're different in the same situation, because we have zero control over everybody else, even though the world right now and people think that if I threaten you and I yell at you and I shame you and I ignore you and I withhold love from you and I blame you, I can control you and therefore try to get you to behave in a way that pleases me more. I think a lot of you know that that's ridiculous and manipulative, and it's not going to work. So in today's show, Dr. Davis invites me on because he does not address emotion at all in his podcast or in his work. But he does recognize that there's a need for it. And again, he gave me 30 minutes and I took it, ran with it, and talked a mile a minute. So if you're new to me, I apologize in advance. I normally don't go quite that fast, but I really felt a great opportunity to give a lot of information, and that makes me speed up. So again, just put your podcast player on a little slower. I know for most of you, probably put it on faster for other people, but in this case, you're going to want to maybe slow it down. All right. Now, Dr. Davis's podcast is called Defiant Health. It's somewhat new. If you are not subscribed and you like him, he's been on the show twice already. This will be third, but he doesn't say too much. He just asks me some questions and then he lets me go. And then he'll be back on in the next coming weeks with his newest book, Supergut. All right, so get ready, put your player on a little slower, and enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to Defiant Health Radio, a place where you can count on hearing about the truth in health, uncolored by interests of big pharma, the generally misplaced motivations of healthcare and doctors, just ideas and strategies that work safely, effectively, and inexpensively. I'm your host, Dr. William Davis, cardiologist and author of the Wheat Belly and Undoctored books. In this episode of Defiant Health, I interview personal trainer, counselor, and astoundingly prolific podcaster and personality, JJ Flizanes, who advocates some unique approaches to mental and emotional health to help identify the factors that block many people from achieving their health, weight loss, and relationship goals. Later in the show, I'll be also talking about Defiant Health podcast sponsor, Paleo Valley, makers of terrific fermented grass-fed beef sticks, bone broth protein rich in collagen, and other terrific products. I've been a guest on JJ Flizane's podcasts a number of times, and I came to recognize what a unique and empathic person she was, with many uncommon views, especially regarding mental and emotional health, something that I do not address much in my own programs. What especially caught my attention was JJ's particular focus on helping people identify factors in their lives, a past relationship, prior trauma, questions about self-worth, and others that kept blocking people from enjoying success in the various spheres of their lives, whether it was weight loss, feeling good about yourself, success in work and family lives, and health. JJ is adept applying many eclectic tools to help people identify those factors that booby-trap their success. Given JJ's unique perspectives on topics we don't discuss here much in the Defiant Health podcast and my other venues, I asked JJ to come and share her views with us. Well, welcome, JJ. It's really a pleasure to be on the opposite side of this interview. So listeners know I've been on your podcast. Of course, you have a great number of wonderful podcasts, and I've been on a couple of them at least. But I was always impressed that you seem to be very good, very insightful on something that I am not very insightful on. That is human emotions and behavior. Now, I know your prior background is as being an actress and a personal trainer. How did you fall into this world of emotion and behavior?
You want me to keep this succinct? Okay. So I'm always a seeker. I'm curious. I'm very curious. I ask questions and I look at patterns. It's just been my entire life of looking at patterns from whatever position, whether it be emotional. And again, part of the actor background, which for a long time I had to sort of make sense of. We all have a left and right brain. In fact, we have, 2 parts or 4 parts of our brain. And the sort of right brain creative side of me had an outlet most of my life. I'd been singing and dancing. And so I was really in touch emotionally. And on an astrological scale, I'm a Pisces. So I'm very feeling, I'm very intuitive, I'm very empathic. But then I also recognized as I got older that my left brain, my linear, strategic sort of information gathering part of the brain, when I finally learned a science that made sense to me, and it's not that it didn't make sense. I had good grades in school, but it was when it made sense to me mechanically, when I could see exercise physiology mechanically, when I could see biochemistry mechanically, I all of a sudden was like, oh my God, I'm smart. I get this. I understand this. And so now it changed my opinion of myself. And I started to activate the left brain a little bit more and get into science and science of the body. And again, looking at patterns. And as a trainer, as I started to learn different parts of the body and starting with anatomy and physiology, and when I looked at structure and function of the joints, and I would work with people. And mind you, I was in my early 20s when I started my personal training career. And I was so, I'm my own specimen. I'm my own, everything that I tell anyone else to do, I've either tried or done, or I've explored on my own. I'm not the person who says, well, go try this. I don't know anything about it. I'm going to be curious and try everything on. So I'd have clients who wanted to lose weight, and I would just get this intuitive sense there was something really wrong with weight loss industry from the aspect of, especially women who weren't connected to themselves, didn't like themselves. My first book is called Fit to Love: How to Get Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit to Attract the Love of Your Life. Well, the love of your life is actually you. And you have to love and respect who you are to make any of this worthwhile, because you won't stick to any lifestyle if it's not coming from a place of self-love. If it's coming from a place of self-hate, if it's I hate myself. People go to the gym and they hate working out because they feel like it's abuse. They get on a treadmill and I can feel the animosity of their like hating it. Do you think that stimulus is going to invite them to want to take care of themselves on a higher level? Of course not, because it's emotionally painful. So as I was working with clients, both from a weight loss perspective and joint pain, oh my God, joint pain, I became I mean, my personal training practice exploded when I moved to California because I understood the body, biomechanics especially, and I could work with people with 7 to 10 injuries like nobody else could because I understood how to manipulate force and gravity and force and motion in order to produce some results, whether it be increasing muscle mass or getting their heart rate up to help to stimulate whatever we were doing at the time. But that was when I looked at the people who had the 7 to 10 injuries, the people who had the back pain, who had the chiropractor, who had the acupuncturist, who had the massage therapist, who never had relief long-term. And once you go through, okay, their spine looks perfectly aligned. Their muscles are balanced for the most part. I do know about endocrinology. I worked in a functional medicine clinic for a while. And so I do understand hormones. And again, I've learned so much more since then, of course. But, when I check off all the scientific boxes, what's left? Well, what's left is how we influence our body to produce hormones, to excrete everything in our body, from our neurotransmitters to our digestion. When you're in fight or flight and you have adrenal fatigue, your body isn't in healing mode. And no matter what you do, it isn't going to work because you're in fight and flight and your body's in a freeze state. It just needs to survive. And when I looked at all the different reasons, I came into Dr. John Sarno's work also. I had a friend who was visiting me from New York City in California, and he had back pain. And I remember his story was life-changing for me because he went 2 years with this debilitating back pain. Hence, did all the things, physical therapy, yoga, massage, acupuncture, blah, blah, blah. And finally, he went to see Dr. John Sarno. He was living at the time. And he had 4 sessions with him in New York. And it was basically emotional. And his back pain went away half of it went away after reading his book, his first book, Healing Back Pain. So that was my proof. I kind of always sort of understood and knew, and you just look at patterns intuitively of people who are stressed or people who walk around with sort of a negative energy, who seem to have nothing going well for them and everything seems to go wrong. And then you have the people who intuitively are happy and everything's been going well for them. You have to ask what's something's got to give here. This is like a pattern of angry, unhappy people being sick and having pain, and happier people being successful and pain-free and healthy.
Now, how did you accomplish that, JJ, in the setting of, say, being a personal trainer to somebody who's got, let's say, back pain or self-loathing or some issue like that? How do you approach that in the setting of personal training?
Well, it started with Dr. John Sarno's book and saying, read this book, Healing Back Pain. And I'll never forget one of the last people I had who had really debilitating back pain. The first person I gave the book to, who basically was like, it's not because people, especially men, hear emotions and run the other way. And, but yet I could say to all of you men, do you have stress? Oh yeah, I have stress. Well, what the hell is stress? Can I say hell on the show? What the heck is stress? Stress is a perception that and an interpretation that causes a negative feeling, anxiety, depression, anger, whatever. Stress is emotions, but men don't want to look at emotions. Emotions, that's touchy-feely. That's out of control. I don't want to do that. But do you have stress? Oh, badge of honor. Yes, I have a lot of stress in my life. Well, stress is emotions, everybody. And so and we know that stress can affect your body's ability to heal. Stress can cause things in your body to break down. It increases inflammation. It decreases immunity. Just right there, we have the reason to not be stressed, or the reason to learn how to not manage, but how to process emotions so that you don't have stress. I'm not about stress management. That's like rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Who wants to manage the stress? I mean, you still have it. We want to release it. We want to transform it, transmute it. We want to process it so that you get to the other side of it. It has a point. It has a purpose. You grow and now you're happy and things are better. So as a trainer, how did I handle it? I'd give them the book. I'd say, here, Dr. John Sarno's book on back pain. And then I had a client once and she had neck pain. And I gave her the book and she read the book and she felt better. And then she started to look at that too. And again, really high performing, successful people have the back pain and the neck pain and the shoulder pain and the knee pain. These are all indications of repressed rage. Now, when I say repressed rage, it is unconscious. So when you tell somebody you're angry, I love this response. Working with cancer patients right now is very interesting. I'm starting to categorize them into groups. So far, ovarian cancer patients, endometrial cancer patients, anyone with a lower jowl, second chakra issue in cancer has a lot of repressed emotion, which is the same area where the back pain is in Dr. John Sarno's work. It's repressed rage. That's your power center. Now, when I look at breast cancer patients, they have a different kind of energy to them. The ones that are in ovarian and endometrial and again, lower jiao area, they're angry. They get a lot of anger. And when I say, can I reflect back to you some of the things that I've heard you say? And they're like, oh, sure. I'm like, so it sounds like you really haven't, you still have a little bit of residual anger. I'm not angry. I'm like, okay, you are not ready to do this work. And that's okay. So as a trainer, it was hard to do this work. I have several men who, again, happy to say, oh my God, my stress level is so high. Can we deal with your emotions? I don't want to talk about my emotions. Okay. One particular person had back pain. It took me 8 years. He had to have pneumonia finally. I kept saying, your back pain's emotional, your back pain's emotional, your back pain's emotional. Because it would always happen after a trigger. His brother would piss him off. His wife would have a fight with him. He'd be afraid of finances. He'd come in the next day and his back would be out. I'm like, do you not see the pattern? And it's because we work on all the structural stuff. You have adjustments, you go to acupuncture. We've been doing resistance training for 8 years. And it took 8 years for him to finally be in the hospital and read the book again and be like, oh, and then his back pain almost went away overnight. And now it becomes a barometer of the emotion and energy, because emotion is energy and motion. It's when you have a thought and a feeling that's negative and it creates an emotion and it creates energy and it's like calories. You have two choices. You either express it and release it, use it, or you store it. It's very simple. And most of us are storing it. And when you store it and you store toxic emotion long enough, it creates cancer or it creates irritable bowel syndrome or it creates something else in your body because it's literally energy, negative energy that hasn't been expressed or used. So just like a calorie that's not been used, it's going to build up in adipose tissue potentially. So that's why I had to move out of the personal training world, because I wanted to work with my people on a mind, body, soul level. And at the time I was with a lot of people that just wanted weight loss and to look better and, to work on their joints. I mean, I don't know how many knees and shoulders I've fixed over the years without trying because of the exercises they were doing, but also because they got me at who I am. I can't not be this person. So I would ask the questions, I would probe, I would, life coach them even if they didn't want to. But I eventually had to get out of the personal training world and just claim this whole mind, body, soul coach, because I want to work with people who aren't afraid of their emotions or at least ready to deal with them. And I had Dr. Northrup on my show for the third time recently. And at the end of the interview, I was telling her about what the work I'm doing right now. And she said, oh, absolutely. The emotions are the one thing that everybody needs that nobody wants to do. It's the last resort. It's when someone's literally, I have cancer patients on their third round of the same cancer who are now finally ready to deal with their stress and their emotions. And I know, I get it. I'm built weird. I'm different. I love emotions. Emotions are the only reason we make choices in life. The only reason you want anything that you want anyway is because you think you'll feel better when you have it. You want weight loss because you think you're going to feel better. You want money because you think you're going to feel better. You want a relationship because you're going to think you feel better. We base every decision in our lives on how we want to feel. So the great news is that between quantum physics and epigenetics, we can handle all that ahead of time. We can work on that top level sciences as far as I'm concerned, and everything underneath benefits. But when you try to manipulate all the sciences underneath an umbrella of negativity, you're going to have a harder time getting results in whatever you're doing or sustainable results. So that is why I've had to literally break through that's why I started my first podcast, Fit to Love, was so that I could kind of sneak it in there. Like I had a 6-day-a-week show and it was exercise videos on proper form, which became Smart Exercise. Then it was Tasty Tuesdays, nutrition, that became Easy Paleo, Gluten and Dairy-Free Cooking, both videos. And then Wellness Wednesdays became Nutrition Alternative Medicine. Thoughtful Thursdays still doesn't really have a show yet. It does. It's just sitting there. Freedom Fridays became my #1 flagship show now, Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. And then my Sexy Saturdays became Women, Men, and Relationships. But my spiritual part and the Thursday and the Friday show was my way to kind of sneak in the psychological behavioral stuff, as well as the spiritual and, again, epigenetics and quantum physics sciences that affect all of it.
So in trying to figure out what's driving someone's behavior, this thing lurking in the background, what does that process look like, JJ? So it sounds like you start by raising awareness that this could be a factor, but where do you go next generally?
Great question. I'm getting ready to do in next year, probably at the end of February, a free webinar called Why Traditional Talk Therapy is Ineffective. And I apologize for any of you out there who are therapists or have had success with therapy. It's not meant to piss you off, although I'm okay if it does. But the reality of it is most people, shouldn't say that. Let me say that a lot of people that I've worked with have not actually healed things. To me, healing is when you are different in the same situation. So avoiding a situation because it triggers you is not healing it. Being in the same situation and not being triggered and having positive emotions and feeling grounded and feeling centered, that's healing. Now, how do you get there? And it isn't just analytical. It isn't just using the left brain to understand what's going on, although it's needed. It's also getting to that right brain state of oneness, of everything is connected, of that you're a fluid, as Jill Bolte Taylor would say, that you're fluid in life and that there is no separation. That right brain part of our existence, which people try to get to through meditation, sometimes drugs and alcohol, and being creative and fishing and meditating and dancing. And I use a right and left brain approach, but I do kind of like a doctor. I use a diagnosis and then a treatment plan. And what's really interesting is I have my ex-husband's aunt is a nurse, and she one time, and she'd come to me for advice, which was interesting because she's a Western medical nurse. And she'd say, so, what's going on with me, JJ? And I have this book, it's called Messages from the Body. And it's a psychological meaning of, it's 700 some pages. It's literally like every toe, every joint, every tooth, every vertebrae, and the psychological meaning. Now, we start, and not that I use this book to diagnose, I do look at the book and I do say, does this resonate with you? And most of the time everybody says there's something that resonates with them, but I'll go back to look at core wounds. I've had Harville Hendricks, who created Imago therapy. Imago therapy is based on the fact that we choose our partners to heal the wounds of our past. So with that, which I believe 100%, I waited so long until my ex-husband and I were in the last stages of our marriage. And I took him to this, and because I thought, I have to have a partner to do this work. And when I went and I did this work, life-changing, there's an exercise in there. It's the core, it's creating your Imago exercise. And after I did it, the therapist we were seeing at the time, I walked in and I said, why isn't every single person in therapy doing this exercise individually? Because I changed a pattern instantaneously by seeing my patterns that I've been doing since birth. And it was like it was the fast track versus the why I think people resist therapy is because I don't want to go talk to somebody every week about what's going on in my life. Like, why am I talking to somebody? You don't understand the roadmap. I'm creating a course called The Roadmap to Emotional Healing because I want to show people the structure. I'm sure when you were working with your patients, you gave them a diagnosis and then a treatment plan. Here is what you're going to do first. You're going to do second. When this changes, you're going to do third. Here's what you follow. Well, in traditional talk therapy, they don't do that. You come in and you first have the get to know you conversations, and it may take a month or a year. And, I feel comfortable with you now. And you're talking about what's happening right now in your life. What's happening right now in your life is a response to your core wounds. So why do we got to wait a month, 3 months, 5 years to get there? Get there now. Diagnose the problem. Figure out what the core wounds are. What did you not get met by your parents? What are the things that you're searching for in your life that every single choice you've made is trying to fulfill for you? Then we can take the diagnosis of what's the problem and look at the treatment plan of what you need to do to get your needs met, to heal and love yourself, to go against the fight or flight brain activity that happens when you're afraid of something. We all have patterns that we think protect us, and we go into that protective mode of shutting down. And when healing happens, it's actually what Harville will talk about. And I'm sure you understand neuroplasticity and creating new neural pathways. In order for us to create new neural pathways, we have to do something new and do something that's uncomfortable. We have to create a new pattern, just like in exercise. If I want to rehab a joint or work a muscle differently, I have to move my body differently in order to create a new neural pathway to stimulate more muscle fibers that I haven't been using before. Well, it's the same thing with the brain and emotions. If I open up different parts of my brain, I decrease the emotional response and the body's response to a trigger. But the first initial doing it is normally against the thing that the habits that you have, no, I can't do that. That's the exact thing you need to do. And understanding that from a broader perspective can help you do it anyway and feel brave, knowing that when I get to the other side of that and I do this thing I don't want to do, I do this scary, uncomfortable thing that is against everything I've always done. That's what actually produces the healing. I'm sure you've heard people say, you got to feel it to heal it. That is true. but you don't have to like live in it. And I think that's what people are nervous about when they start doing this work. They think you have to be in therapy for 20 years. How many people do you know that are in therapy that have you seen no change in them, except possibly their awareness? Oh, they're aware, but their life looks exactly the same. They respond the same. They talk about the things the same. They behave the same. They're not any happier. They're just now aware of their patterns. And now they're in compensation mode. Oh, I'm going to avoid that person because they bother me. How about heal you so you can be around them and have it not bother you? Isn't that more empowering than trying to make decisions and to be a victim to circumstance? So between law of attraction and quantum physics and empowerment, I'm creating and I'm writing my next book about this because, again, I think that it's needed for people to quickly see that it doesn't have to be the long road, like all of the judgment about therapy and working on yourself. That's long and it's painful and it may not work. And it may not work because you may not be working it and because you need a structure. I find that men especially need structure, and I like structure. And I'd like to show you the structure of all the different high points that you want to understand, like love languages. I can help a marriage just by love languages. If you understand that, all of a sudden now people feel better. Astrology, I use that too. I mean, I've got so many tools. My toolbox is so full and I keep putting more stuff in it, but it's picking out the most important things. So where someone would start would be, I want to diagnose, if you will, whatever the core wounds are. And then looking at, again, the roadmap of emotional healing for each person and some of the quick things they could do to feel better now. And then the long-term things that over time, they're going to have to change their patterns and behaviors.
So could you give us some examples, JJ, of what that healing process might look like? Let's say we have somebody who's had a very dysfunctional relationship with a parent who is hypercritical, just say, and it's carried into their adult life and they can't lose weight and they've got back pain, have all those other kind of assorted issues. What would could you give us some examples of what
Absolutely.
the healing looks like?
Okay, so that's a great scenario. All right, so the person's they've got back pain, so they're probably very angry. Their parents are super critical. So my guess is that person feels invisible, feels not valued or not loved. So that might be the core wound that underneath all of this is feeling not important because they were never acknowledged and they were always criticized. So they're not good enough, which is really a lot of us actually, like the root of all of our stuff is I don't feel good enough. But in this particular situation, not feeling good enough, now they're using the weight. See the weight, let's say they're an emotional eater, which by the way, I do want to say to everyone has an addiction or two or three. Now, for those of you that your addiction isn't drugs or alcohol or tobacco, it might be food, and food you use to repress emotion. It also probably is control. And that's what I found with the fitness industry, which is why I wanted to get the heck out of it, is that a lot of control freaks, oh my God, it's all about calorie counting, gotta get my exercise, I gotta do CrossFit. It's like, oh, you're all such control freaks. You don't know how to, anyway, that's not healthy either. That's another extreme, which is why I was like, nothing felt right. I'm like this, so there's no balance here. So the person who is possibly can't lose weight because they repress their emotion through food, because they're mad at their parents and they don't feel good enough in the world, and the tapes in their subconscious keep playing about that they're not good enough, they're not good enough. And the choices they've made, they want to break out of that, but they're looking for validation from other people. So my guess is that person, their love language might be words of affirmation. So now they've put all this stock into getting validation from others in order to feel better about themselves, but that's an endless, codependent pit you're never going to get out of. We can't ask other people to make us feel better. That's not how it works. We have to go within and we have to like ourselves. So that relationship has to start within. So someone like that, I would recommend that they have to do a deeper dive into who they are and what they appreciate about themselves and how do they get love for themselves, and asking themselves, am I doing this because I love myself, or am I doing this because I want others to love me so I love myself? And again, that was what Fit to Love was about, was literally the difference between the motivation underneath this, that I'm doing this because I honor myself and I care about my future and my body, versus I'm doing this so someone will love me so I'll feel better. So that person, again, I might want them to do some affirmations or affirm themselves on a more regular basis because they're looking for it from others. I did an episode called The Shadow Side of Love Language, and that episode talks about if your love language is words of affirmation, when someone is critical of you, it hurts more. So it's understanding and doing a little bit of self-work on understanding that other people don't try to hurt you purposely. And even when they do, it's still always about them. It's always a mirror and reflection about what's going on with them. So the person who is using food to repress emotion and has back pain is literally just in constant repression. So that person, besides using words of affirmation to start to affirm themselves and self-soothe, if you will, and acknowledge the things that they do well, I'd also recommend that they process those negative feelings, that they stop using food. I had a client come on from the show. She did a case study with my empowerment strategist trainers, and she came on wanting weight loss. She came on saying, I drink too much. I eat too much at night when I get home from work. I've gained 30 pounds, blah, blah, blah. And I let all the trainers talk and give her advice until the end. And I said, okay, here's the thing. None of this is about weight loss for you. You are in a complete repression. Everything you do is about repressing what you really want to be doing, which is art. You took the job for money, but you don't want to be doing that. You need to express yourself through art. Well, now she's doing art. Now she's selling art. And now she's lost weight and she doesn't drink as much and she's not eating as much because we got to the root of why she was repressing all this emotion. So I would want to work with somebody in the way of having them deal with their emotion and let's look at, what are you angry about? Let's express that. Let's unpack that. Let's look at what you think others should be doing for you that you ultimately need to do for yourself. How are the ways you're disrespecting yourself? So we have to start just looking at the overall picture and changing the behavior. And again, it's easy to identify and to diagnose. It's not easy to live. So between other tools of tapping, of Ho'oponopono, of, again, the imago therapy stuff, of looking at just whatever comes up, and then all the different ways in which they could move through self-love without, and again, words of affirmation, my partner, Doug, is words. And since we've been together, because words would definitely hurt him. If I even said something that wasn't positive and it was just neutral, like you and I'd be like, yeah, okay. He'd be like, He'd take it so personally. I said, it wasn't negative. So he learned how to literally it's like, if you can imagine words coming to your head, anything that isn't positive, he literally would stop, turn it around, say, what I heard you say is I'm amazing. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I said. So he has done a great job of being able to, now it's not an issue. Like if I say something critical, he laughs because he turns it around and he self-soothes, and his response to needing validation has decreased. I use tapping. Therapists use EMDR, eye movement desensitizing reestablishment, to help with triggers. And again, I can't emphasize enough that some of the work that you need to do are more physical things like EMDR or EFT, because again, we have to change the neural pathways of these triggers and traumas, that when you think of something, it creates this emotion, it creates this neurological fire that produces a physical response that we need to decrease and disconnect. And that's going to only be done through more physical kind of things.
And the approach sounds very individualized.
It has to be. It has to be. I can give, I'm thinking about this Roadmap to Healing course that's going to happen in April of 2022. And I have so much information, and I can't give it all to you in 4 weeks, and it wouldn't even make sense. But where we start will be a diagnosis, and here are some of the things you can do on your treatment plan. And again, I think that the work out there could help everybody sort of start the process. But I also think, we can't, what's the Albert Einstein quote? I think it's you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. Until you change your interpretation of things, until you change your perspective on things, until you release your defensiveness because you're just trying to protect yourself, when you understand that you have to open your heart to feel love, you can't just shut out the negative feelings. You shut off the positive ones too, until we're brave enough to understand this. And I think that painting the picture of emotions, I've wanted to write a book called The Anatomy of Emotion. I have a course on it, but I think someone already did it. But I think that's important for people to understand. I think men like you, scientists, doctors, when you can see it from that perspective, all of a sudden it doesn't become so scary. Now, the feeling of it, because emotions challenge our ability to hold control over our lives. And that's why it's so scary for people, because most people are control addicts and they think they're going to die. Their body thinks they're going to die if I cry or get mad. Now we know that consciously that's ridiculous, but it's such a charge that we can't control that most people just want to repress. This is why the state of the world, I think, is the way that it is because we're all so freaking emotionally repressed. And then when something happens, like a little pinhole in another area, we get super charged up about, and about whatever, because it's our outlet. It's why people cry in movies. They can't cry in their life, or they cry at commercials because they can't cry in their life because they're so worried about the control. But then they like break down when a door is open in another area and they're like, oh, and they find some relief. So it is very individualized, but the roadmap is going to stay the same. The treatment plan will change. The diagnosis will stay the same.
So what are the common points of entry that you find are productive? Failed weight loss, frustration, sadness, depression?
Well, I've been doing this, I've literally been talking about emotions in personal training for 20 years. So let's, and I've only sort of moved away from personal training completely in the last 4 years. So I'm going to end my show brought me people who were wanting relationships. I think the whole idea of, cancer patients, because of the doctors that I work with in the cancer world, because they acknowledge that emotional side. I would say success with money and life purpose. I have a lot of people who listen to my show who know that they're meant for more, but aren't doing it. And so they recognize there's a block there and they don't know how to articulate that. They don't know how to find that. They're looking for their purpose. They want to feel better about themselves. So the weight loss piece, it's one of them. But again, I'm not as interested in the weight loss community because, again, it's so big. And I've had to learn the hard way when I show up to speak about weight loss. I don't do it anymore. But that the people who just want weight loss, and there's a whole section of them that just want to take the pill. They just want to take the pill. They want to get the surgery. They don't want to deal with any of this other stuff. So I don't want those people. I want the ones who weight loss might be part of your journey, but you understand that what's driving this is not because you eat bad, most of the time. You choose to eat the way that you do. Why? It's based on an emotion. It's based on your respect for yourself. It starts emotional, mental, and psychological before it ever becomes physical, even if it's subconscious. You're reaching for that thing. And if you're not conscious of it, then it's about repression. If you are conscious about it, you're making a decision to say that I want this thing that I know is bad for me. I know it doesn't do good things for my body, but I'm going to eat it anyway because it's going to make me feel good temporarily because I'm searching for feelings. I'm searching for feeling good, right? And so I teach law of attraction in order to help people understand they can feel good without the things. Again, getting control over the fact that you get to focus and think and create from the brain, from the heart, from the soul that has nothing to do with anything external and exterior. So there really hasn't been a one lane of people. It's really that the people who understand the emotional and spiritual component that's there. And again, I'll say it's the people who get tired of because they've tried everything else. They've tried everything else and it hasn't worked. And they're like, all right, what is this emotional piece? And it resonates. Like I was preparing for today's interview and I had all these books out and I was like, okay, I'm going to write down all the scientific stuff because he's a doctor. And I'm like, okay, I got Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. And I thought, stop. I don't want to convince anyone who doesn't resonate with me or with this because they're not ready to hear it yet. You're only ready to hear it when you're ready to hear it. And you're ready to work on it when you're ready to work on it. And there's not going to be a moment sooner because I actually bought this book, The Biology of Belief. I love Bruce. He's been on the show. He's coming back. And I told him, I said, I didn't even read your book because I didn't need to, not because I know it all, but because The Biology of Belief says it all. I'm like, yes, your beliefs affect your biology. That's all I know this, but I can't write this book and I know all the science to prove it, but I don't want to. But I bought the book because a friend of mine was very scientific based. I wanted to argue with him. Basically, I wanted to read the book and prove to him. And then as I started to do that energy felt so bad. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. He doesn't resonate. He's not ready. He doesn't want it. He's not asking. So I'm here just to be the beacon of light when people are ready to know that your emotions create your reality. Your emotions affect your body more than anything, even your food, because when you are stressed, your digestion slows down. When you are stressed, your inflammation pumps up. When you are stressed, you go into adrenal fatigue, your cortisol, your whole body chemistry changes. And the difference between healing and not healing to me is that the container that you're working in is in a state of allowing and a state of helping to produce the things that help you. And if you do all the things under the umbrella, again, of negativity, repressed rage, anger, resistance, right? It's all wasted effort because you're going to get this far, but it's an uphill battle.
I recognize the absurdity of trying to fit the world of JJ Flizanes into a single podcast interview. So if someone thinks they're receptive to this kind of thinking, JJ, what's a good place if they're not in Southern California and can't come to see you face to face?
I do everything on Zoom. I don't see anybody face to face anymore.
Oh, got it. That. And then what's another good place to start, say, among your podcasts and or books?
So if your community is weight loss based, I guess Fit to Love or Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. Again, most of the shows have the same content on them. Okay, that's why I can run five podcasts every week, is because they're the same episode, just with different branding on it. Because some people are going to be attracted to nutritional alternative medicine. Everyone ends up, though, I'll tell you, at Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. But that's not where they start if you're afraid of that.
That's the podcast, right?
Yes. If you just type in my name, JJ Flizanes, into Apple, you will see all that I have. And again, if you're watching this on video, behind me, you can see I've got nutrition, alternative medicine, Fit to Love, and Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, and Health and Wealth. All four of those, and women, men, and relationships have the same content on them mostly. So I would start with a podcast, because honestly, I had someone recently say to me locally here, hey, all of your clients, mastermind that was here. Oh, they were kind of telling me what you do. Do you have a card? Can I send people to you? And I was like, no. And then she looked at me like, you don't want business? I'm like, I don't want it this way. I go, you need to send people to my podcast, because they have to be pre-qualified, that they know what they're getting involved in. When you said 30 minutes, I was like, oh, okay. And I talk fast anyway, but I talk fast because I'm like, how much can I fit in 30 minutes? How much can I spew out to everybody in 30 minutes? But ultimately, if this is a journey that you have to be ready for, I love my podcast, because when people are listening and they resonate with me and they connect with me and they connect with you and they're ready, they just show up and say, okay, I'm ready. I don't have to sell anybody anything. They're ready. They know the content and they can use a lot of what I teach on themselves right away. I change lives on my show, and I never talk to the people. I get messages and testimonials later. Oh my God, you changed my life, blah, blah, blah. And they tell me how, and I don't know them. So it's free content that is impactful if it resonates with you. And if it pisses you off, know that it does resonate with you. It just means you're not ready yet. It means that you're in resistance mode right now, and that's fine. And you may come back to it and you may not. But my podcast is the place to start.
Well, thank you, JJ, for the easiest interview I've ever had.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for allowing me to come on the show.
And really educating me and educating my listeners, who I have not served well in this area of emotional trauma, healing, and those kinds of things that you are expert in. So I'll list all your podcasts and everything, because I want to encourage people to make use of your knowledge, wisdom, and your platforms, and maybe even talk to you. But JJ, thank you deeply for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. It was a pleasure and an honor.